a CRN original.
Attention, you are about to hear the captivating voice of an icon in the movie industry. You have heard him and seen him in performances in over 140 films. He's met and influenced many world leaders, and now he's about to tell you how to unite the America he loves.
That job's filled.
Unique. Brilliant. And unpredictable. Robert Davi is a Renaissance man who writes, directs, sings, and does it all with excellence.
Yeah, it's okay. We're all very impressed, but let's get on with it now.
Robert Davi believes he should use his voice to both repay and help unite America, the America that made his dreams come true.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Robert Davi Show.
Speaking of unpredictable, I'm not Robert Davi. I'm Thaddeus McCotter, former member of Congress and recovering politician, once more filling in for the raconteur, crooner, actor, director, essentially all-around entertaining individual, Robert Davi. And when Robert says, I have an offer for you, you cannot refuse. And he's asked me to host the show, and I'm quite honored to do so. Today with us, we're going to have Katya Sedwick. She's a writer in the San Francisco Bay Area. Her work has appeared in City Journal, The American Conservative, The Spectator, as well as many other publications. And welcome to the show, Katya.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite an honor to have you. I'm relatively new to your work, but it's been quite impressive, especially your writings about San Francisco and about national politics as well. Can you tell us a little about your background so that we can get the perspective from which you've been writing?
Of course. I was born in the former Soviet Union, and I left when I was 16 years old, right before it broke up. Where I come from, it's actually, I usually say Russia. I used to say Russia just to make things simple, but it's Ukraine. I've never lived in independent Ukraine, so I just say Soviet Union. And I came to California in 1990, and basically I lived here in Northern California ever since. And that's my background and my perspective.
And we've recently had Amina Milanic on, who came from the war-torn Yugoslavia, emigrated to the United States, and eventually earned her citizenship. The question that I have for you, too, is what attracted you to the United States? What was it about the United States? What did you hear that made you want to come here?
Oh, well, it's freedom, of course. Growing up in the Soviet Union, of course, I was surrounded by propaganda and how awful the United States was, and just this decadent society that treated poor people despicably, and there was no free thought, et cetera, just horrible things about propaganda that Soviet propaganda came up with. But then at the same time, we all listened to rock and roll, and we're, like, as I grew up, I started tuning in into foreign radio stations, and just to hear the truth. And we were actually quite attracted to the United States and the ideas of liberty at that time. That was very popular.
See, that's one of the interesting things, Katya. Amina Milanic was saying that it was film that really attracted her to the United States, put the United States on her radar screen as a potential place where she'd want to emigrate. And with you, it was the music. So was it, because I've seen a document, yeah.
From that, but yeah, popular culture, generally speaking, and we wanted to wear blue jeans, for instance, and that was kind of, it was edgy, because it was, American dress. Yeah, so I wouldn't exclude film either, but rock and roll, probably more so than anything else.
Wonderful. As someone who enjoys rock and roll myself, I can totally understand that. Now, in your writings, you talk about, let's start with San Francisco. You're a writer from the Bay Area, not being from the West Coast, being from the Midwest. How do you describe San Francisco to people who generally just have a rudimentary understanding of it?
Well, it was once a beautiful town. It's probably the most beautiful city in the U.S. The weather is gorgeous. It's never too hot. It's never too cold. It rains sometimes, but whatever. And it just looks the classic San Francisco Victorians. They just look like they're stuff from a fairy tale. It's gorgeous. But as my husband likes to say, the best way to live in San Francisco, to walk down the street, is to keep your eyes fixed on the second story so that you see the beautiful architecture, but not what's going on the street, which is actually quite dangerous because there are homeless people there, there's drugs, and it's unfortunate what happened to the city, and it wasn't always like that. When I came here in the 90s, it was fun. There was a lot going on. There were places to go shopping, places to go eat, shows, all sorts of things. But at some point in the mid-aughts, the junkies took over. And there's always been drugs and some sketchy neighborhoods, but the way it is now is absolutely unbelievable. That such a beautiful city can be completely San Francisco downtown. The area around the city hall, the theater district, this huge neighborhood Tenderloin that is gorgeous in terms of the architecture, in terms of what could happen there. It's completely taken over by junkies and by drug dealers. And even get into San Francisco, where I live across the bay, so I would have to either drive on Bay Bridge or take public transportation like BART. And I wrote about BART for City Journal recently. It's unrecognizable. It used to be fairly convenient and necessary form of transportation, but now there are just so many drug addicts and so much crime, so much criminality, assault, violent assault, that ridership is down 90% from what it was before the pandemic, and it's not picking up.
This is Thaddeus McCotter hosting with the Robert Davi Show. We're talking to Katya Sedwick. She's a writer in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, Katya, you've talked about a book, I think it's Season of the Witch, which talks about the political progression, shall we say, from the old school Democratic politicians into what is essentially now the progressive movement is now running San Francisco. What can you tell us? Can you tell us a little about that progression?
Yes. Well, basically what happened, of course, everybody knows about the Summer of Love. So 100,000 people came to San Francisco, just kids came to San Francisco during Summer of Love, and that put a stress on local services because they had to be provided for somehow. And local performance troupe called the Diggers actually encouraged that, and they encouraged the kids to not work, and they had, for instance, a free store where everything was free. They got stuff from dumpster diving, etc., and then they gave it to the kids. And they were telling kids that that's how things are supposed to be. And that's where some of the hippie movement ideas come from, that everything should be free and it's universal love, and somehow you will be taken care of. And at the same time, there was proliferation of drugs, of course. And although we think of Summer of Love as landscapers drop in acid, but actually the main drugs were heroin and methamphetamine. So it was a very different scene. And did that?
And did that then? Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So that then did that start summer of '67 with the influx of the younger people brought there under a sense of basically libertinism? Did that then start to affect the political landscape of San Francisco?
Yes, it was an urgent sense. Well, one thing, old-time residents were moving out of the city because of drugs, because of people having sex out in the open. It was no longer a child-friendly city, and actually, when Dan Feinstein ran for mayor in 1976, I want to say. No, in 76, that was later. So part of the program was to bring porn stores in a particular area just to keep them out of the way of the families. And she was criticized by Harvey Mills for being the Victorian truth, but just that particular suggestion that seems very mild. So there was all of that going on, and at the same time, there was gay liberation going on. There were more people were coming to San Francisco. So demographic.
We're up against a hard break, Katya. We'll be right back with Katya Sedwick talking about San Francisco and next, the parallels between the Soviet Union and where the United States is today. This is the Robert Davi Show.
I'm Al Simon, 91 years young. I created Balance 7 20 years ago. At 67, I went to see the doctor for the first time in my life and found that I had medical problems. He told me that was normal for my age. I don't believe God intended us to be sick and old. I decided to find something to bring my health back. For 10 years, I studied pH and how important it is to the human system. Balance 7 gave me back what I lost by getting older. I no longer get out of bed with a joint discomfort. Balance 7 can do for you what it has done for me and many others. In 3 days' time, you'll feel more energy, less joint discomfort, and clarity of thinking. No doctor or hospital can do what Balance 7 can do for you. Balance 7 is the key to unlocking the healthy immune system. Bring your body back to balance. Order now. Receive free shipping with the code word AL. Go to balance7.com. That's balance7.com. Order now and get your free shipping and a free gift with your order. Go to balance7.com. Use the code word AL.
Do you want to fly somewhere, anywhere in the world? Smart travelers call myflightsearch.com for the best deals on flight tickets. Going to Manila, Bangkok, London, how about Singapore? Call myflightsearch.com for the lowest flight tickets available. What about a local vacation? Let's say you want to fly to Vegas, Orlando, Miami, Los Angeles, or Denver. Pick up the phone and call myflightsearch.com right now. We have exclusive deals that you can't find anywhere else. The only way you can get these low airline prices is by calling us. We have so many low prices available, we can't possibly tell them to you right here and now. If you're flying somewhere anytime in the next 6 months and you want the lowest airline ticket prices anywhere, you owe it to yourself to save a ton of money. So pick up your cell phone and call myflightsearch.com right now.
Call 800-445-3166. 800-445-3166. That's 800-445-3166. Call now. 800-445-3166.
Hi, my name is Lily. My mom and dad used to fight about money all the time. Then one day, I heard them talking about this guy, some uncle I never knew, called Uncle Sam. Well, they say this Uncle Sam guy wanted them to pay him like $1 gazillion, and they didn't have $1 gazillion. So they called this company they heard on the radio called the Tax Doctor. And the Tax Doctor worked with Uncle Sam's people. I think they're called the IRS. And they were able to work it out so my mom and dad didn't have to pay Uncle Sam very much money at all. So now mom and dad are happy, and I'm happy too. Thanks, Tax Doctor.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS or state, call now and pay less.
800-391-8713.
800-391-8713. That's 800-391-8713.
Robert Davi.
You know, I'm the one delivering the message, not receiving it.
Hi, this is Thaddeus McCotter filling in for Robert Davi. Robert is away working on a project. We are joined by Katya Sedwick. She is a writer in the San Francisco Bay Area. Her work has appeared in City Journal, The American Conservative, The Spectator, as well as many other publications. We were talking, Katya, about the transition from Dianne Feinstein to where we are today with Mayor London Breed, and how the young people who came in 1967, the logical end result is basically to be found on the streets of San Francisco today, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. And I was talking about a book by David Watt called The Season of the Witch, and it's about that transformation. It's a very honest book, written from a very progressive perspective, and the author basically maintains that whatever had to happen, even though it was ugly. And among the ugly things was the ugliest things probably described in that book was the Jim Jones cult. And although it's well known that Jim Jones had very close relationship with all of the Democratic leaders of San Francisco, because he could be counted on to produce a sizable number of people to come to city hall meetings. His followers could be counted on to just knock the doors on behalf of the candidate, stuff like that. But what's not as well known is that he fixed the 1975 election for Mayor George Moscone and other progressive candidates. And that was basically how progressives took over.
And in taking over, you made the great point in your writing about this. You made the great point that they've gone from people who were very industrious over time into basically a large percentage of that population simply wants the government not only to fix the roads, but to run their lives for them, to take care of them.
Yes, absolutely. And there's not an idea about how to control the population, from, I don't know, banning phone books, banning paper straws, some of the most stringent COVID rules, et cetera, et cetera. There's not an idea that's not supported by the majority of San Francisco population. And that also includes they want to take, somehow it's popular to want to take care of the junkies, and to the point that they're now building safe consumption centers, or actually they don't call them safe consumption because that wouldn't be true. They're called supervised consumption centers, where junkies can go and get injected with whatever drugs that they do, usually fentanyl, and make sure that they don't overdose on the drugs. But perhaps the reason why they don't call it safe consumption anymore is because overdoses are going to happen and people will die because it's such a powerful drug.
This is Thaddeus McCotter filling in for Robert Davi on The Robert Davi Show. We're talking to Katya Sedwick, a Bay Area writer whose work has appeared in places such as the City Journal, The American Conservative, and The Spectator. Katya, riffing on San Francisco to the larger theme of the United States, you have recently written a piece where we're heading towards a point, some of the parallels are striking, such as with the mask mandates and others during the pandemic. You talked about how totalitarian and authoritarian governments give you the illusion of freedom because of permitted, quote unquote, freedoms, which aren't really freedoms at all, are they?
No. What happens in a totalitarian society is that the government takes away our freedoms, and then it just doles it out on a piecemeal basis. And that's what happened here. When we went, with 15 days to slow the spread, we went indoors. Our freedoms were taken away. And then we were allowed to maybe go to the stores without a mask for a while. Now I'm masking again, and the children weren't in school. Now they go back to school, but again, it's so carefully regulated that you can't call it liberty. It's just not that anymore. We're basically looking for the government to allow us the minuscule degree of freedom, and then people will be thankful for that.
And in the end, too, doesn't it? It becomes an erosion. People start to tend to expect this, to become inured to the fact that their freedoms that they've been deprived with. And you rightly point out, they then are grateful for what they are, quote, permitted to be allowed to do. Mm-hmm. Isn't this exactly what happened in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, and I used an example of Soviet writer Ilya Ehrenburg, who was allowed to write about, who was allowed to travel abroad, for one, and who was allowed to write about the Western art scene in his memoirs. And his memoirs were widely read for several decades afterwards because, oh my gosh, you can read here about Picasso, and you can read here about this and about that. And it was incredible for us to be able to learn these things from the book. But at the same time, once true freedom took over during Glasnost in the late 80s, all of a sudden nobody needed these books because any magazine could print all the information we wanted about modern art scene or early 20th century Russian poetry or whatever it is that interests us.
The Khrushchev, the de-Stalinization, wasn't it? And if I can, Katya, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't the fact that Khrushchev recognized the rights and freedoms people had. He was considered wonderful because he simply permitted you a couple of your God-given rights, correct?
Yes, that's exactly what had happened. And actually, Ilya Ehrenburg called that time ottepel or Khrushchevska ottepel, Khrushchevsa, meaning that it was people felt freedom the way they felt spring. It was exciting. It was exhilarating that we could do a lot of things. People could read a lot of things. My mom, as I was growing up, my mom's youth fell on that time, and I was growing up in 70s and 80s, and she was telling me how wonderful it was, and we had this beautiful music, and we had this opportunity to learn about Western film, and to me, part of it seemed like, okay, well, she's nostalgic for the years of her youth, and everyone is, but then I was looking at what was going on around me, and I saw that she has a point.
Well, Katya, thank you so much for joining. I'm sorry, but we're up against it. I thank you so much for coming on the Robert Davi Show. I'm Thaddeus McCotter. We've been talking to Katya Sedwick. She's a writer in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can find her work at the City Journal, the American Conservative, the Spectator, and other publications. I cannot recommend it more highly. Katya, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can do so again.
So much.
It's totally normal to be constipated with belly pain, straining, and bloating again and again.
No way.
Maybe it's occasional constipation.
Maybe it's not.
You could have a chronic condition called irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C. Linzess, or linaclotide, is a prescription that treats IBS-C in adults. Linzess works differently than laxatives to help relieve belly pain and let you have more frequent and complete bowel movements. Individual results may vary. Do not give to children less than 6, and it should not be given to children 6 to less than 18. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling. Maybe it's not occasional constipation. Learn more at linzess.com or call 1-800-LINZESS. You may be able to talk to a doctor online. Visit linzess.com, sponsored by Allergan and Ironwood.
For the getaway of your dreams, come to Hawaii's Playground, Ka'anapali Beach Resort, on the fun side of Maui, where the world comes to play. Find your spot on Ka'anapali Beach with 3 miles of white sand, 12 resort properties, 2 golf courses, and 2 shopping centers. Enjoy the playground of Hawaii's ancient royalty. Ka'anapali Beach Resort is Hawaii's original master planned destination resort and home of the Hawaii Food and Wine Festival. With views of 2 neighboring islands, you can breathe in the land's natural beauty from your favorite resort or golf fairway. Come experience Ka'anapali's own special brand of Hawaiian hospitality with world-class dining, relaxing resorts, water sports, and activities of every kind. For romantic, family, and great friend getaways, discover the options of Ka'anapali Beach Resort, where the world comes to play. Plan your getaway today. Visit Ka'anapaliResort.com. That's KAANAPALI Resort.com.
Do you want to fly somewhere, anywhere in the world? Smart travelers call myflightsearch.com for the best deals on flight tickets. Going to Manila, Bangkok, London, how about Singapore? Call myflightsearch.com for the lowest flight tickets available. What about a local vacation? Let's say you want to fly to Vegas, Orlando, Miami, Los Angeles, or Denver. Pick up the phone and call myflightsearch.com right now. We have exclusive deals that you can't find anywhere else. The only way you can get these low airline prices is by calling us. We have so many low prices available, we can't possibly tell them to you right here and now. If you're flying somewhere anytime in the next 6 months and you want the lowest airline ticket prices anywhere, you owe it to yourself to save a ton of money. So pick up your cell phone and call myflightsearch.com right now.
Call 800-445-3166. 800-445-3166. That's 800-445-3166. Call now. 800-445-3166.
Keep listening for a free offer from U.S. Med. If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of sticking your fingers over and over again. By simply wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of sticking your fingers right away. If you're testing your blood sugar daily and administering insulin 3 or more times per day, or using an insulin pump, call today and learn about the latest CGM technology. We'll send you a free ebook telling you all you need to know about CGMs. A CGM can immediately reduce pain. It's accurate, easy to use, and helps you make better diabetes treatment decisions. Your new CGM may be covered by Medicare or private insurance. Call now to learn more. 800-524-9313. 800-524-9313. That's 800-524-9313.
The Robert Davi Show.
I'm Dwayne Robinson, LAPD. I'm in charge here. Not anymore.
Welcome to the Robert Davi Show. I'm your host, guest host, Thaddeus McCotter, former member of Congress and recovering politician. Today, we have a unique honor. We are being joined by former representative, U.S. Representative Melissa Hart. Melissa is currently an attorney and consultant with the firm Hergen Roeder, Riga, Ewing, and Kennedy, LLC. She serves on the board of directors at Enterprise Bank in Allison, Pennsylvania, and she occasionally consults on campaigns with a group called RPC Strategies, and in full disclosure, so do I. We're going to be talking about Pennsylvania politics and national GOP politics with Melissa. Melissa, are you with us?
I am with you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let's cut right to the chase. How are the Pittsburgh Penguins going to do this year?
I fear they aren't going to do as well as the Detroit Red Wings.
Why would you fear that? You should welcome it. You should embrace the winged wheel.
Well, we're going to start the season this year without our number 1 and number 2 centers. For the hockey fans out there, they might recognize Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin's names. It's a little bit...
Evgeny Malkin. Yeah, I think Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote about him or something. No? No.
He was an escapee.
Yes. Some of the greatest Red Wings were. Yeah, people like Fedorov and Konstantinov.
Oh, wonderful
the
story.
Russian Five. Yeah.
They figured out ways to get out. So why do we want to turn into that?
That's true. And we were just talking, I don't know if you were able to hear some of it. We were talking to Katya Sedwick, who emigrated from the former Soviet Union to the United States. And sadly, she's seen some parallels between what was happening here during the pandemic and continuing through the Biden maladministration to things that occurred in her youth in the Soviet Union. I mean, what do you think about what's going on, Melissa?
Well, I would agree with her, although I've never been to the Soviet Union. From what I've read,
Bernie Sanders has.
Yeah, and he really liked it. Apparently, he should have stayed.
The honeymoon.
So I think
there, yes.
Yeah, really. What a place to go for your honeymoon, especially the era that he had his honeymoon. But I just don't understand why Americans would want to freely give up, because they're freely giving up their freedom. It makes no sense to me. Life is easier, apparently, when mommy and daddy look after you.
It is ironic, isn't it, Melissa? The Democrats, and especially the progressives, like to consider themselves the smart party, and yet they have no problem with allowing other people to do their thinking for them.
That's a good point. I like the way you phrase that, because the unfortunate part about this is that it's a groupthink principle. You know, they've come out of the same university climate with those who, I think the old adage, "Them that can't teach," in that way, those people couldn't operate in the capitalistic society, and they ended up in academia because of that. And unfortunately, that group grew, and apparently they've gained political strength now, as we see. And it's something that is just unbelievable. And when I look at the communities that I used to represent, significant proportions of the community had very strong economies based on strong American manufacturing. They've lost a lot of that. And people did become, I would say, confused, upset, disappointed maybe is the best word. But to turn to a communistic style or a socialistic style of government is not the answer.
Well, I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing Biden's polling in free fall as people start to realize the virtual candidate is now a virtual president and a literal disaster across the policy spectrum. You were talking about Pennsylvania. I love Pennsylvania. My grandparents hail from Patton, Pennsylvania in the West, up in Cambria County. What are you seeing in Pennsylvania? You're from the Pittsburgh area. What are you seeing in Pennsylvania politics right now?
The big cities are still firmly in the grip of the hard left. I just heard news, in fact, the other day that a longtime congressman here, Mike Doyle, who you and I both served with, may be challenged by a woman who's a state representative and one of the first successful progressive hard left politicians. She's now talking about challenging Mike Doyle for a congressional seat in the primary. It's something that I'm not surprised, I guess, to hear, but it's something that leads me to believe that that mindset, especially urban areas, university areas, hasn't weakened as much as we'd hope yet. But even in suburban areas, I think where we saw the most kind of surprise damage by the progressives, meaning that a lot of suburban people who maybe had a distaste for President Trump's style decided to just abandon him in favor of whatever the other was, instead of paying attention to what the other is. And now they're starting to realize what the other means, and they don't much care for it.
I think you're right, Melissa, because to a certain extent, because I live in a suburban type community here on the outskirts of Detroit, but when you look at it, Trump sucked so much oxygen out of the room and left little room for people to be ambivalent that you either loved or hated him. And if you hated him, it actually masked the progressives' radicalism. And now that they actually have some semblance of power, slim majority in Congress, they're actually being seen for what they are. And people are not liking it now that Trump is out of the way.
And that may be a gift for us, because if they were able to hide, or if they had been a little bit more measured in the last since January when the Biden administration took over, they might have been able to protect themselves a little bit more from that wrath. But I think because of their aggressive move forward, and maybe they learned a lesson from the brief time that Obama had the Democrats House and Senate, that they wanted to go, hit the ground running. So they did. But I do believe you're correct in that people are starting to say, what? That's kind of like, what are they trying to do? Now, my bank, I'll give you an example, and now I just attended our state community bank convention, and it was interesting to see how many people were talking about this new proposal to basically have every bank, no matter the size, have to report all these transactions of $600 or over that's been proposed in the House. It is just the most outrageous invasion. And, to a man or a woman present at this convention, they were like, this has to stop. Democrats, Republicans, they don't care.
This from an administration that won't show anybody what's on Hunter's laptop or won't come clean about his business dealings, wants to look at every $600 transaction of Americans across the board. Now, I think you were talking about the Obama example. I think they drew the wrong lesson because they had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, a huge majority in the House, and they squandered it in those 2 years passing Obamacare instead of biding their time, consolidating, building it, and actually putting forward a better plan. And it seems the lesson they've learned is do it real quick because the public's going to catch on to us and throw us out.
Because they don't trust the public, and they never have. I mean,
right.
When you think about their policy. Exactly. So they're just trying to do it in the dark of night, undercover, with their media hacks, basically trying to sell it. And that's another thing that I think people have caught on to. Even randomly, when I have conversations with people now, I'm hearing them say, where do you get good news? You can't trust the news because it's all bet, because it's all opinion anytime you flip on the television.
I think you're absolutely right about that. We have to go to break shortly, and we're talking with Melissa Hart, former member of Congress, current lawyer out in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. And we will be back here on the Robert Davi Show. I'm Thaddeus McCotter, honored to be filling in for the great entertainer.
Have you heard about Vine to Bar chocolate? It's the winemaker's chocolate, the world's first chocolate made with well-vined Chardonnay marc from the beautiful coastal vineyards of North America. Gently pressed grapes are harvested after juicing, dried and finely milled and carefully blended into the finest dark chocolate. The Chardonnay marc contains highly beneficial grape nutrients, flavanols, and has a natural sweetness that flavors the luscious dark chocolate. Mouth-watering, flavorful, delectable dark chocolate goodness with Chardonnay sweetness and beneficial nutrients. And it's alcohol-free, too. It's Vine to Bar chocolate. Order some today at vinetobar.com. That's VINETOBAR.com. Cold shipped to your door, it's Vine to Bar. Vine to Bar chocolate. Visit us at vinetobar.com.
The smartest way for you to get the lowest prices on your plane tickets, domestic or international, is to call SmartFares first or last, but you've got to call us before you book your plane tickets. Fly anywhere in the world, fly anywhere in the U.S., and SmartFares can save you up to 75% on your plane tickets. We have the lowest airline ticket prices on over 500 airlines. And you've got a great 12-hour free cancellation window. Plus, with our live agent help, you can always get fast help and fast answers. So on your next trip, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, how about right now? pick up your phone and call Smart Fares, plus save up to 75% on your plane reservation. So call right now. 800-915-2644, 800-915-2644, 800-915-2644, 800-915-2644.
You order a glass of your favorite Cabernet, fresh asparagus, hollandaise on the side, a filet, medium rare. You unfurl your napkin with a flair, close your eyes, and prepare to listen. Ah, there it is. The sweet music you long to hear. The sizzle. The sizzle of a Ruth's Chris steak.
The most magnificent corn-fed prime beef, broiled to perfection at 1,800 degrees. Some call it a sizzle. We call it an anthem.
As the waiter approaches, you think, is this one mine or that one?
Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Like Ruth always said, life's too short to eat anywhere else.
Make a reservation online at ruthschris.com or by calling 800-544-0808.
Robert Davi.
Another $80 million write-off.
I guess it's time to start cutting overhead.
Welcome back to the Robert Davi Show. I'm guest host Thaddeus McCotter, former member of Congress and currently recovering politician. With us is Melissa Hart, another former member of Congress and currently a lawyer with the firm of Hergen Roeder, Riga, Ewing, and Kennedy. She serves on the board of directors of Enterprise Bank in Allison Park, Pennsylvania. She occasionally consults with a group called RPC Strategies, as do I. And unlike myself, she is a rabid Pittsburgh Penguins fan. Melissa, we were talking about Pennsylvania. You have a governor's race up next year, don't you? As Michigan does as well.
And I don't know if you're finding the same reticence among Republicans who have some standing to run, but we're seeing now this smattering of way too many people in our primary and way too many people who are great people but don't have a whole lot of government experience, or the experience they have in government is, the last 5 minutes. And it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, we should have a governor who, gets somebody who doesn't have government background. But the reality is that if you want to go in there and you want to fix what is wrong with the Commonwealth, and it's probably true in Michigan as well, you need to know something about it. We've had a governor, by the time that our new governor will take place, whoever that may be, who will take office, we've had this guy Wolf here for a while, who, quietly got elected as a Democrat because our Republican was not particularly effective. But nobody really knew what his agenda was. And he's been a very left-wing progressive governor. And in fact, he really botched the COVID situation here. He was one of the governors who has the dubious distinction of having sent COVID-positive patients back into nursing homes, further infecting, unsuspecting patients who were there. So we lost a significant number of seniors as a result of that decision. Just not good. And I think a Republican has a good chance of winning. But right now, I think there are about 8 or 9 candidates on the Republican side.
You have a Senate seat up as well, don't you, in Pennsylvania?
Yes, we do. We have 2 statewide. Now, our current Senator Pat Toomey will be finishing his term at the end of 2022, so we'll be electing his successor in 2022. And unfortunately, we've had a kind of a messy campaign here so far. But again, there's a smattering of candidates. We have a gentleman who is a businessman and been pretty successful in that, who'd run statewide for lieutenant governor, but lost to Wolf, running for the Senate. And he just exposed the background of the gentleman a lot of people thought was the leading candidate, as having PFAs filed against him in a very unsettled personal life, which has turned off a lot of people. And then we have a woman who airlifted back into Pennsylvania. She's a native, came from California back home. She served in the Trump administration as the ambassador to Denmark. She's a candidate, living back home again in Mechanicsburg, which is central PA. And then we have a woman who came from Alabama. She and her husband are raising their family in the southeastern part of the state. She's a military veteran who'd run for Congress and lost. And she's a candidate. So we have a lot of what I would consider people who are really qualified to run for, the state house, who are running for the United States Senate. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there because of the national attention that's paid to those Senate races. And, of course, I'm trying to hold on to Pat Toomey's seat, which is a Republican seat. If we lose that, it's going to be harder for us to get the majority back in the U.S. Senate.
Now, one of the things that is very important for a party heading into a contested general election, especially in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, is how quickly does the party heal, Melissa, in Pennsylvania? When you go through these primaries, so many candidates. I mean, what happens? Do you have money and resources left? Do people come together, or do they stay somewhat divided and hamper the ability to throw out the Democrats that are doing so much damage?
Right now, I think we're still too divided. So this year, for example, we don't have any controversial races statewide. We have state Supreme Court, state Commonwealth Court. Those are all our statewide appeals courts. We have 4 openings and 4 very good candidates on the Republican side. So we have to have a shot at that because the Republicans aren't fighting among themselves about those candidates. And I'm hoping that this race will unify the people, whether they were pro-Trump or not pro-Trump. They need to understand that they're still the Republicans, and they're there because of policy, not because of personalities. I've been working on my local level to try to get to different events and talk to people on the ground. And I'm starting to hear people say that, what you've expressed is this concern that, we better get our act together. We better get our fundraising together. And our state chairman is a little bit too low-key for my taste about it, although I think attempts will be made. I think he'll try to put that together after we get these judges, hopefully a couple of them at least out of the 4 elected. But I'm a little worried. Pennsylvania is a pretty volatile state, as you know. Michigan is not too different, with a governor everybody's mad at. Is she up for re-election?
Yes, next year. Yep, both of us. In Pennsylvania and Michigan are going to elect governors next year.
Okay, but ours has to leave, and that's our good fortune. Ours has his 2-term limit, and he's at the end of that. So we'll have a new governor no matter what. The question is, the Democrat is most likely going to be our current Attorney General, who's taking every free photo op and every opportunity he can to sound like he's the good government guy, and he's using that office to run for governor, and has been now for several years. We'll see if we can find a Republican, though, who can come across, let's just say, more concerned about the Commonwealth than himself or herself than this guy comes across. The issue right now, Josh Shapiro has already made clear that he's a gubernatorial candidate. So I think now people get the chance to shoot at him for the next year, which he probably sees an advantage, to having his name recognition. But I see it as an advantage for us. People can take him apart. We actually had a wonderful candidate for Attorney General last year, Heather Heidelbaugh, who's been an attorney for the Republicans for a while and very smart, talented attorney, who ran against him and put up a really good fight considering the difference in money. And she had no background in government, but has been a litigator her whole professional career, and nearly took him out.
This is the Robert Davi Show. I'm Thaddeus McCotter, filling in for Robert. With us is Melissa Hart, former member of Congress, currently a lawyer in Pennsylvania, and she also consults with RPC Strategies, as do I. Melissa, what is it going to take? We talked about how divisions within the primaries can cost us a general election at times. After watching what the Democrats are doing and what they continue to want to do, and what is it going to take people to realize that the enemy is not the Republican next to you, it's the Democrat that is destroying the state and destroying the Commonwealth and destroying the country?
Well, I think we couldn't ask for a better administration to help us come together, to be honest. I think it's akin in a way to what Trump did to the Democrats. They all kind of came together and in the end made an analysis of which one of them could actually get elected president. And then they chose the morose Joe Biden. because they thought that he might pull, he'd pull some Republican votes, which he obviously did. So I think now that we see that he's not really the guy that they sold and he really is a shell for the progressives, that the Republicans are starting to understand that. I'm seeing that in Western Pennsylvania. I'm not 100% certain what's happening in Philadelphia. That's always the toughest because it's been trending Democrats. There's people who they're more interested in what the people at the university think, I think, than they are in what their businesses think. Unfortunately, too much of our economy is tied up in academia or medicine or other things, or government, things that are dependent upon government money. We've had a lot of people be financially coerced into bad politics.
So when you're looking, well, what you're seeing though is interesting because while Trump was generally disliked by a majority, I think, of Americans because of his personality, his policies were wildly successful, and unfortunately, the personality overshadowed the policies. What they're running into with Biden is his personality is not particularly winning when you see it up close and personal in the Oval Office, but more importantly, the progressive policies are failing the American people, and they're failing not on an ideological or abstract level, they're failing as a concrete reality in their daily lives. And that's going to, so that when Biden is gone from the presidency in 4 years or 8 or whatever, the failure of those policies from the progressives are going to remain an anchor around their candidates' necks.
I'm hopeful that that's the case. Sometimes people have short memories, but I think your point now that the practicality of government is a huge failure. I mean, nobody can argue that what's going on with the southern border is successful, although Biden tried to, apparently. I don't know anyone who thinks that that's okay. And then of the communities now where they're airlifting, these people who have really unknowingly become pawns of the Biden administration. They're airlifting them into red states.
And they're not vaccinated and everything else, and it's just a failure of maladministration. This is the Robert Davi Show with Thaddeus McCotter. I was honored to fill in for Robert today. We've also been talking with former Representative Melissa Hart about Pennsylvania and about American politics in general. And I thank you, Melissa, for joining us today. Hopefully we can do it again. I think the one thing I'd like to leave you with, as I conclude my guest host duties, is remember, politicians have only the power that you delegate them. They are your servants, and no one should let their servant run their lives for them.
America to me.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you could donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free, and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-785-9618. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for